and welcome to IndiaPostLive.com, India's first live and interactive news conversation web TV. I'm Prachi Jatanya. A recent Intelligence Bureau report about NGOs working in the country created quite a stir, and two journalists have decided to take on and demystify what really the Intelligence Bureau does. We'll get you a report. Take a look. A recent 21-page Intelligence Bureau report on NGOs and their supposed negative impact on the economic growth of India made headlines in our country. But the alleged leaked report caught the attention of two eminent journalists who, instead of blindly following the report, dug a little deeper into the IB's track record and questioned its credibility. Ajit Pillai, the former political editor of Outlook, and Hartosh Singh Bal, the political editor of Caravan magazine, in their recent articles talk about how the IB really functions and, more so, how journalists can possibly fall prey to being used as pawns by the government. So that's what we are trying to discuss today on the conversation at India Post Live, and we have both these journalists who have filed their stories. One who's written a very tongue-in-cheek, witty piece in a Karnataka newspaper. We have Mr. Ajit Pillai here in the studio, the former political editor of the Outlook magazine. Thank you, Mr. Pillai. We'll also have Hartosh joining us on the Google Hangout, political editor of the Caravan magazine. Thank you so much, Mr. Hartosh Singh, for joining us on the conversation. We'll have some students also joining us who are very intrigued by the workings of the Intelligence Bureau and what these two journalists have to say about it. But first, I'll get in Mr. Pillai. Your article, of course, is sort of has a bit of a sarcastic tone and questions the internal workings of the IB and the report that actually spoke about the NGOs working in India. So your take?
I think much of it is largely based on conjecture. The IB is not an organization which works under CRPC. It does not have to produce credible evidence. Credible evidence is something they use that the IB itself uses so often, but it never produces it. So when you say 3% of the GDP has been knocked down by NGOs, I mean it's a rather far-fetched estimate which runs into some 2.5 lakh crores. So if somebody is to believe the report, they have to ask the first question they have to ask is, where did they get this figure from? Who estimated it? Are these people who sit in the IB, and we have known, and I have known personally, that they've been producing manufacturing stories which they put out into the media, which has of late not even being verified, but it's just said the IB said it, so IB said it. So IB said it, it's right. I think that sort of a situation is what is alarming. I mean, if they are going to say, make such tall statements, which is going to determine government policy, and which somehow seems to express the fears of the government about various issues, then they should come out with actual evidence. And I'm sure if it's taken to a court of law, much of what was said in the 21-page report would not stand true.
Right. So you have also spoken in detail about how over the years the IB has become notorious in actually branding people, and of course it hits their reputation. Like in the 90s, the IB of course leaked a certain information about ISRO scientists D. Sasikumaran and Nambi Narayan. So of course you said that both the scientists were actually labelled as spies.
Yes, they were labelled as spies, and they even found a woman who knew them, who was a Mauritian citizen, and then they had the entire story out in the media. And both these top scientists who were involved with the cryogenic rocket project, they were arrested, they were tarnished, and the media had a lot of wrong things to say about them and their liaisons with this Mata Hari from Mauritius. Later on, when the case was investigated, as it happens with most of IB allegations, it is left to the local police, the special branch, or the CBI to investigate these cases. And when the actual investigation happens, it comes to light that it is all kind of a concocted story. And it was as much acknowledged before the Supreme Court, which released both these scientists and said there was no case against them.
So So it was fabricated.
It was
pure
fabricated, and as somebody put it at that point, it was a total cock and bull story.
Right. On that note, I'll get in Hartosh Singh also. Hartosh, your detailed article in the Caravan magazine also touches upon similar lines about the internal workings of the IB and how there's a lot of mystery surrounding this agency, but nothing really is substantiated with their reports that come out.
Look, one, you have to understand the role of intelligence agencies. Every country has intelligence agencies doing various sorts of work. They are not required to meet standards of evidence. They are required to provide inputs to the government. What has happened, and I think this may happen to some degree in every democracy, but I think it has been exaggerated greatly in India, is that our IB spends far more time observing other politicians in opposition, settling course for the government rather than worrying about what its primary role should be, picking up intelligence inputs on whatever may be reasonable threats to national security, however you define it. In that culture, it is not your analytic ability or the capacity of your intelligence, it is your ability to please your political masters that takes great importance. And this is what has happened in this case. You read the ridiculous Greenpeace report. I mean, I am ashamed to say that no IB officer that with a certain degree of education has cleared an exam, gone through a process of training, and put his pen down to such a report, which is full of canard, has no logical substance to it, is making unfounded exaggerations about, as Ajit said, 3% of the GDP. My God, we should immediately shut down all NGOs, wait 1 year. If our GDP doesn't go up by a percentage, then we should disband the IB. I mean, if this is the kind of estimates they are putting out. The Gopal Subramaniam case is even more interesting. You suddenly find the IB is giving reports on the fact that he meditates for 1 hour in the morning, so we cannot trust his process of arriving at decision making. I mean, they would have banned Ramanujan from doing mathematics if he had left it to IB to do such things. So, I mean, this is all just pointless. This is the government using the IB as a political tool and the IB letting itself get used in this fashion.
Right. Hartosh, again, to elaborate from what your article, of course, highlights is, do you feel that other government agencies or intelligence agencies like the RAW or other agencies which are required to actually get in intelligence inputs and work diligently also have a similar kind of lack of authenticity or credibility these days?
RAW and IB are constantly competing with each other to get the attention of their political masters. The electricity seems to have gone off at my end, but I think the internet link is still working. So, I mean, the idea is to make sure you have the Home Minister, the Prime Minister, whatever his ears by giving him the kind of information that he wants, which means that you're already creating a bias which has nothing to do with the facts on the ground. And today we are in a far more dangerous situation. Our NSA Ajit Doval is a former IB man. Look at the Gopal Subramaniam case. What really irked Modi or the Modi government was his advice on the Ishrat Jahan case. Who was the IB chief when all this case was unfolding? It was Ajit Doval. Who is one of the men indicted in the murder? It is Rajendra Kumar, the IB man. It is in the IB's interest to make sure Gopal Subramaniam is not a Supreme Court judge. I mean, this is not even conflict of interest. This is actually making sure that you, at least in this case, depending on what evidence the CBI has presented, that you're trying to shield officers of the organization from murder. And in doing so, you're going to willingly play up to the gallery, the government, and do whatever the government wants to do.
Right. I'll bring in Mr. Pillai, sir. You've also encountered IB officials on numerous occasions. Have you also had similar kind of experiences?
Absolutely. It's always been like that. And I mean, I'd go along with Hartosh, and I would also just get in the military intelligence. And I have a little anecdote from my Outlook days when military MI, military intelligence, planted a story about a brigadier who had let in the army, Pakistani army, during the Kargil operations for a financial consideration from the Pakistanis. It was such an atrocious story that my editor said, go find the brigadier. He had been pulled out of Kargil and sent somewhere. and we located him. And we found that he was the man who was giving the advance warnings to the army headquarters, saying that such an intrusion is happening, and our establishment did not listen to him. So finally they framed him. They tried to plant a story. So similarly, all the intelligence agencies, they have, whenever, they play to the government, as he said. And what the government wants, they establish through various concocted stories, half information, half-baked information. And then I'm sorry to say that they have journalists who are compromised, who just take these reports and just print it, and they have editors who support them in this process. So it's quite a sad, sorry situation, as I would say.
Do you then feel that it is, of course, a telling sign of how our journalistic standards are, of course, no longer credible anymore, and IB reports and, of course, editors playing at the hand of the IB and, with the leaked reports is something that is concerned?
Yes, it is, because, I'm not saying that editors and journalists didn't accept these intelligence plans in the past. But now, today, as we talk today, I think IB is has become the most powerful organization in New Delhi.
Right.
More than any other ministry, it has been allowed to pass judgment and check the antecedents of defense suppliers, as it came out in the Indian Express recently. They have been asked to give details about possible appointee, a Supreme Court judge in waiting. They have got all the powers just now with Mr. Doval in command. They are likely to become the most powerful agency, which is dangerous because it can give out information which is grossly inaccurate.
Right. I'll also bring in Hartosha. You've also given a detailed, comparison of how editors in Delhi have largely come now in two kind of shades, and there's clearly a way that these editors get access to Delhi's power corridors, and that's how it's really being misused, and they're playing at the hands of the IB.
Well, two things. As Ajit said, it was not as if things were particularly great in the past. We should not live under the illusion that we had some golden era of journalism and things are going bad. What has happened is that things were never very good to begin with. The media is expanding. There is competition. People are trying to get stories in quicker. The editors are trying to beat the other newspapers. In this whole process, editorial rigor is getting more and more compromised, just to ensure that the story that grabs eyeballs will make it either to print or to sort of prime time on the news. So I think this process is going on. What has also happened at the same time is that the government, and this has been obvious in the Modi campaign, and you go back a little, itself has got much smarter in terms of how to play the media, take advantage of the need to grab IBOs, give them the kind of stories that will get played. That makes it more important for editors to actually exercise their role as editors, use their discretion, look at what is coming their way, examine it skeptically, and I think that is not what is happening in this whole rush, which the government is exploiting very cleverly.
Right, then you of course feel then that the editors are actually helping the IB and the government in actually being able to successfully tarnish the image of many individuals and professionals who could possibly be set for a position in the government or a position of power.
Well, if you are going to reproduce the reports against Greenpeace or Gopal Subramaniam without any comment just because the IB has issued a report, IB can write anything about anyone. The IB is not constrained by Parliament or, as Ajit said, any criminal procedure code. There is no letterhead. There is no accountability. Nobody can ask questions about what the IB says. The IB could put down anything on a piece of paper and give it to the government, and if the government leaks it out and reproduced it as it is, all the damage is done. There is no veracity to an IB report that can be actually authenticated against real evidence. That is not the IB's job in any case. So the point is, in this process of making IB reports public deliberately, bypassing the entire scrutiny that is necessary for such appointments and for such stories to appear.
What then possibly, Mr. Pillai, is the solution? Is there a way of trying to make sure that the IB is more independent, detached, or is run in a more responsible manner? Is there a way out?
I think the only way out is for editors to say, look, but then it's asking too much. For the editors to say, look, here's an IB report, let us go and check it out. If the IB is going to give you a report, let us see what is this 3% of the GDP when it came to NGOs. Or when they say that, somebody is a terrorist.
Let's verify it.
Let's verify it, and what is the information that they have?
Based on.
And what the IB does is very convenient. It just files these reports, and if the government takes cognizance, it's left to the police department to run around, and they look like fools when they go to the court, as it has happened in various other cases where there is absolutely no evidence. And I think in my story I wrote about Dr. Subbarao,
Yes.
who was arrested at Sahar airport, and he was labeled as a spy by the IB, and they put him behind bars. He had to study law and fight his own case.
Yes.
He did that. He was a brilliant atomic scientist. And then finally, the prosecutors never showed the evidence to the court, despite several judges saying, let me see the evidence. And finally, I think Justice Saldana of the Bombay High Court said, let us open this packet. They said, we can't open the packet because it's secret documents pertaining to India's nuclear program. We have made no copies of it, and breaking the seal would amount to, some kind of violation of the Official Secrets Act. The judge insisted. They took out the secret document. It was his thesis for his doctorate from IIT Powai, which is available in the library of the institution. So that is how it all works. But the man had to spend several months in prison on a cooked up story. Once again, for various, IB was serving various interests. They leaked the story about him being arrested, and it was there on page 1, and he was labeled a spy. And it took quite a while for him to recover his reputation.
Right. On this note, I'll try and see if my team can connect to the journalism students from Virtual Voyage Media Institute in Indore. We'll see if they have some questions for both our panelists. But before that, I will get in Hartosh here. Hartosh, do you feel then that the report on the NGOs, and you've mentioned Greenpeace, of course, do you feel that it's another gimmick by the government? There's a particular agenda that they are trying to push through by leaking that report?
You look at the sequence of events. Concerns about rehabilitation is dismissed. A day later, there is a report about NGOs. Then there's a specific report about Greenpeace. There's a question about FCRA, foreign funding, etc. I mean, this is not an isolated one-off incident. This is a government that comes with an ideological baggage that is very skeptical of civil society. Narendra Modi had a very tough time with the question civil society was asking in Gujarat. And I think they want to, right at the very beginning, send out a clear signal to people in civil society critical of this dispensation and this government that, look, there are things that can be done which will make life uncomfortable for you. And I think that message has already been sent out. And the IB has been used for that purpose.
We seem to have a problem with the connection, but we'll try and get in some views from the students. Of course, they're journalism students and they have particular questions on this conversation. We have somebody on the phone line. I believe Ashlesha Kaushik is a student at Virtual Voyage Media Institute in Indore. Thank you so much for joining us, Ashlesha.
Hi.
Right. Welcome to the conversation on India Post Live. Do you have a particular question for Mr. Pillai? He has written an article in a Karnataka Daily about the workings of the Intelligence Bureau and how the 21-page report that was leaked about the NGOs working in the country, of course, has a lot of lack of credibility in its research. Ashlesha?
Yeah. Ma'am, the thing is, as we belong to journalism, right? So everywhere, it is a very governing body, it's important governing body where everything is under there. And we the people, whom we trust, are themselves only exploiting everything. So whom to trust now? If the Intelligence Bureau themselves are not working properly, are not themselves working truly to the people, then how should we, trust anybody? Whom should we trust? This question occurs right now.
I think, as journalists, the first thing to do is verify what is being told to you. You verify what the police tell you. You verify what a politician tells you, if he is going to make an allegation. But strangely, the Intelligence Bureau has about it a halo. And you say that they're very intelligent and they know everything. They may not. And they may be working at the behest of some, vested interests. So when somebody comes and tells you that X is that or Y is this, and it comes from the IB report, one of the first things I learned in journalism is that when you get an IB report, most of them are unsigned, not even on a letterhead. The first thing we were taught is that you better go and cross-check. You can't believe an IB report, and people who have believed it, they have run stories at their own risk.
That is what.
Yes.
I want to ask that what is the relevancy of the matter? How can we trust the matter that they have got?
I think,
or is it made by people around them?
I think, if you are going to collect comments, ideas, bazaar gossip, and put it as a kind of, the factual report, it's going to have its loopholes, its problems. So, there are several other agencies, there are several other government organizations which are not really in the habit of snooping around, but are in the habit of finding out facts from whom you could determine whether
the
authenticity of something that is being put out.
Yeah. Right. Ashlesha, stay with us. We also have Hartosh Singh who could possibly answer your question. And of course, please bring in some other students who are with you. If you can pass the phone line to them, we can get their questions in as well. Hartosh, the question that Ashlesha is actually posing to both of you, and Mr. Pillai has answered it, is how do you trust if the IB agency, an agency like the IB cannot be trusted with its report, then where does one, journalist get its, material to write a story?
Well, first of all, largely, there's no reason to distrust the IB. Most of the time, there is no direct interaction between journalists and IB. The IB is supposed to be providing information to the government. It's an agency that provides intelligence reports. There are people on the intelligence beat covering some aspects of what the IB is feeding the government. But clearly, that is one beat where you always have to know that you are going to be paid by the IB for its own interests and for the government's interests. You are not going to get stories that are skeptical or critical of the government. So that is one beat which has to be handled very carefully. And it is not just the journalist's responsibility, it is the editor overseeing the journalist who has to be particularly concerned about the kind of information that is coming out. For the intelligence agencies, journalists are somewhat like the sources. They take information from them and they try to plant information out. It is part of their job.
Right.
And journalists have a job of their own. Often, in the way our roles and the IB's roles are defined, we should actually be at loggerheads in terms of interpreting the kind of information they provide. Too often it becomes cozy complicity.
Right. Very important point made there, and of course a lesson of not taking anything at face value. We also have Miss Arohi, who is also a student from the same institute. Arohi, welcome to the conversation. Your question for Mr. Pillai or Mr. Hartosh or both of them. Please go ahead with your question.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm asking a question regarding politics, that being a journalist, are we supposed to stay neutral or we speak in the favor for a body, political body, so what all the consequences we are supposed to face?
I'm not sure we can follow your question. Are you asking that how does a journalist remain neutral or objective while covering a political story?
Yeah, are we supposed to stay neutral?
Okay.
I think certainly you're supposed to be neutral as a job, but at the same time, one has to question the government of the day and to see and examine whether it is honest in its functioning, whether there are some if there are some loopholes in its actions, then we must point it out. If there are some deficiencies, we must look at that. We can't say, particular party or particular government is great without thinking about it. I mean, I think, being neutral also means there is the role of the journalists of questioning the government of the day, whether it's the Congress, whether it's the left, or whether it's the BJP.
Right.
So you have to take a call on that rather than, I think there is no point in keeping on saying that the Congress is a weak party at this point. Let us look at where is the Modi government failing, where is it succeeding? It's fine.
Right. Hartosh, would you like to answer this question by Arohi? How does a political journalist stay neutral? Also, an added question I would like to ask you is, do you then also have to toe the editorial line of that particular publication or news channel while you are, putting out that report? Isn't it a difficult, sort of a path to walk?
Look, I think when we ask questions in this general term, I think we miss out some of the specifics how reporting is done. It depends on the story. For example, if I'm reporting a story on who's going to be the next BJP president, right now, in that case, my neutrality, my views about the BJP, whether I think Amit Shah is a dangerous man or not, I think are irrelevant to the story, because then what I have to do is go out and find out what are the chances in the current dispensation, what is the game RS is playing, where is the government standing. That's one kind of political story, and it doesn't matter what your views are. If, as a good reporter, you get that story right. Then we are talking of other stories which are commentative, opinionated. I think if it is clear that it is an opinion or a comment, then there is no question of neutrality. You say what you believe, and I think there are sections in the two kind of stories that I'm saying. And you have to decide where your opinions matter, where your opinions don't matter, because in one case it's a story of getting certain facts right.
Right.
And the third thing is, of course, I think one of the big problems you said about editorial line is most newspapers don't have editorial lines. They have lines of convenience depending on the owner's business interest or the personal affiliations of an editor. And that's the problem. I think if the Hindu has a clear editorial line, yes, of course you have to subscribe to it. If the Pioneer has a certain editorial line, of course you have to subscribe to it. That's the decision you make the day you join those organizations.
Right.
If I join an organization and one day the owner is telling me to do one thing, the other day is telling me to do something else because it helps his business interest, that's where the problem lies.
Okay. Said it in no uncertain terms. Hartosh Singh, one final question from the students there. If you're still on the phone line, one final question before we wrap up this conversation, but much more on our Twitter handle, @IndiaPostLive. You can pose your questions to our panelists and take forward the particular issue of whether the IP, whether the Intelligence Bureau has any credibility left, or do you feel that the reports that are being leaked by the IB is serving its interests and the agenda of the government of the day? Do answer these questions and put in your comments on our Twitter handle and our website, IndiaPostLive.com. And before we wind up, we have one last question coming in.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello, ma'am. Hello, Mr. Pillai. This is Sakshi from Virtual Wit Institute, Indore. And my question is, do you think that your colleagues are under the same threat? I mean, do you agree to the point being maintaining a transparency is a threat in journalism?
Are you asking, Sakshi, that transparency in journalism is a threat?
Yes.
What exactly do you mean by that?
Like maintaining transparency or speaking about a particular point is a threat to our jobs. Like, we cannot maintain our transparency and bring the truth in front of the common people.
Right. I think I'll ask Hartosh to answer this before we go to Mr. Pillai. Hartosh, were you able to catch that question?
No, could you just repeat it to me?
Right.
I can hear you clearly.
Right. Sakshi, Miss Sakshi is asking that the transparency of journalists or your particular publication that you're working for is, of course, or I believe the objectivity is, of course, under threat when you're working on particular stories. How far is that true?
I'm not quite clear actually what the intent of the question is. That should organizations be transparent, or is transparency threatened by working on certain stories? I'm not quite
Possibly,
clear.
if you could answer both those questions, please.
Well, one is, of course, that obviously organizations should be transparent. One of the greatest problems today is the total lack of transparency on the business side of media. Who owns what media? Who's funding what media? Where does the funding come from? I think the entire business end of media must be out there publicly available for anybody to scrutinize. That includes from assets of journalists to editors, their pays, to how much advertising comes in, what is the revenue stream for an organization. I think this is almost imperative. We have to legislate that in this country. I mean, there's no way we can have a free media without this kind of transparency existing on the business end of journalism. The other is the transparency under threat? I'm not sure what it means. I mean, if you are transparent to begin with, everything is above board, then I mean, nothing can be a threat when you're working on a story. I think the problem.
Right, I think there is a bit of a...
Obviously, you will go worry if you suddenly find that business interests are involved.
Right, I think Mr. Hartosh, your connection is a bit weak. We'll come to you, but Mr. Pillai, if you can quickly answer that question, please.
Yeah, I think, as far as organizations go, I think ever since the mid-80s, there has been a trend whereby business interests
have taken over,
and it happened with the times, and the times changed and others changed. So you have that sort of pressure on journalists. And as far as transparency goes in part of the organization, it's really very difficult to ascertain who's where and what is happening. People suddenly become marginalized in organizations because equity patterns have changed. And suddenly somebody is very useful, then he becomes useless. So that is at one level. At the other level is, there must exist a perfect world. There are perfect editors, perfect reporters, but that is a utopian concept. So editors are responsible to the Maliks who would wish things to go in such a way. They wouldn't want certain stories to be carried. But what I agree with Hartosh is that things should be made up front. So if you're told you're joining the Pioneer, you better toe this line, it's fine.
Right.
But often in the garb of being very neutral, there are several media organizations which are actually not neutral.
Right.
And they, I think, impinge on the,
Editorial freedom.
Editorial freedom. Yeah.
Right. On that note, we will thank both our guests here for joining us and giving us a detailed insight on what their articles are about and their take on the internal workings of the Intelligence Bureau. And I also thank all the students from the Journalism Institute in Indore for their questions and their participation. Thank you so much, Mr. Hartosh Singh, for your participation and inputs on this very engaging conversation and your advice and guidance to the students of journalism, and to Mr. Ajit Pillai. We'll make sure to read both your articles, and of course all you viewers can access these articles. We'll put a link on our website and you can read them in detail and of course put in your comments and feedback and take forward this conversation online on our website and our Twitter handle @India Post Live. Thank you so much to both our guests for their time and participation, and do stay tuned for more interesting conversations coming up, and log on to our website and post your feedback. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.